Hello, welcome to Trinity Talk Live, water cooler conversation from a Christian perspective. I'm Ken Coughlin, and I have muddy shoes.
I'm Ben Lander, and mine are less muddy.
You know, I just figured mix it up a little bit because it's our last show with Ben.
Very sad.
You don't have, she still doesn't, okay, here's the funny thing. Mary Kay just said she still doesn't have her signs, the signs she holds up to tell us there's a YouTube or a Facebook comment. And we have found them because BA was using them for my class last Thursday night. And so he has hidden them from you and has decided that you don't need them for this last show. I don't know. Is that your sign? That does not look like your sign.
Well, if BA is watching, maybe he can tell us
where the signs
this
are.
time maybe we can blame BA.
No, I don't know. We just, at the end of the class, we just brought them all in here, and I may have put them away and hid them somewhere, so I can't blame BA. She thinks she sees the signs. I'm going to keep talking, so if the camera moves, that's just because she's hitting it. So anyway, welcome to Trinity Talk Live, water cooler conversation from a Christian perspective. If you haven't seen the show before, where you been? I mean, we're at episode 175 right now.
It's been a while.
But seriously, those signs will work. Okay. Well, those signs will still work. We're going to talk forever anyway. The tagline down there says it all, water cooler conversation from a Christian perspective. What we try to do is we try to talk about whatever people out there in the world are talking about around the water cooler, but bringing a uniquely Christian perspective to it. So we talk about things actually trying to put Christ first. How would people talk about all the things that are going on in the world if they actually did really mean that Jesus Christ was their Lord and Savior over their entire life? Wouldn't that be an interesting thing?
Stay tuned. Hopefully, maybe you'll find out.
Maybe we'll find out. That's what we try to do. Anyway, so again, just a reminder. Matter of fact, not just a reminder. Tell people again, why is this your last episode with us here today?
Right. So in case you've missed any of the announcements, I will, as of this Sunday, actually, no longer be on staff here at Trinity. I have accepted a call to be lead pastor of St. Andrew Evangelical Lutheran Church in Muncie, Pennsylvania. And so we leave next week. We're going to move up there and begin our ministry there. And so on behalf of myself and my family, again, we just want to say thank you to everybody, not only just the show, but Ken and Mary Kay, of course, with Trinity Talk, but you guys do so much more. And I'm forever grateful for everything that you guys do here, as well as all the rest of the staff. It's just, it's been awesome. And so I'm truly blessed and grateful to have worked with you.
Well, we are forever grateful to you. Obviously, it's the same thing. You do so much, and I can be grateful. We can talk about the food truck ministry and everything like that. But since we're on Trinity Talk Live, I'm going to focus on Trinity Talk Live and the fact that, you know, about 71 episodes ago or so, we decided let's change the format completely because, you know, it used to be a show where we would bring in different guests every week and have a different topic, and it was a lot of work. And
a little cumbersome.
Yeah, very cumbersome. I mean, you figure that by and large, I was trying to do something that a job that, you know, other shows like your Maury Povich, people remember who that is, you know, they have whole crews that do this for them, you know, figuring out, lining up the guests, figuring out the topics. Wasn't going to work. And so we decided, hey, let's shift it up. Let's just have the same hosts every week, just kind of talking about, from a Christian perspective, what, you know, whatever people are talking about, whether it be politics, whether it be movies, whatever it is. And at the time, you were still the person who had guest hosted on Trinity Talk Live more than anybody else. I think you were like 18 or 19 episodes or something out of the first 103 episodes or something he was on. And so you stepped up to the plate when I asked you, hey, I need somebody who's going to be the regular co-host for the show. And he said, and I said, and I was a little worried because I was like, okay, I know he's like, oh, we said yes when I've asked him before, but now I'm asking him, how about if you just write off every Wednesday night? Just every Wednesday night, I want you. Yeah. You know, that's a little bit different. So I do very much appreciate it, and I think the show's been better for it. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's definitely been fun. It's been good.
Good. Yeah. Well, I'm glad. And hopefully it's been fun for you all too. So just so people know what this means again for the future Trinity Talk Live, after this week's episode, the show is going to go on a little bit of a hiatus until after the new year. For a couple of reasons. One, if you didn't tune in last week, you can still see me, for anybody that cares, on Thursday nights at 7 o'clock live streamed, where we're walking through a 6-week class on understanding evil from a Christian perspective. Talking about, why do bad things happen to good people? What do you say to someone who says, I can't believe in God, because you, Christian, are talking about God being a God of love, but I see so much evil and suffering in the world, I just can't reconcile that. How do you deal with that? How do you answer those types of objections? And how do you be there? Like last week's class was really more about, how do you deal with someone and help someone who's going through some kind of active suffering and had some very painful experience. So that's on Thursday nights right now at 7 o'clock. Got 5 more classes. It's going to be over the next 6 weeks, though, because we're not going to have a class on Thanksgiving. So because that's kind of requiring a lot of my attention right now, that's one reason why we're just going to kind of put Trinity Talk Live on hold for right now. We do plan to come back, as I said, after the new year. And the reason we want to come back after the new year is because we're going to have a new studio to show you all, a new set, everything. We are building a broadcast studio right here on the Trinity Joppa location. Not going to be like your local news broadcast. Nothing that elaborate, but very nice.
I saw some of the panels in the narthex today.
Yeah.
That are going up there. It's pretty exciting.
It's pretty exciting. It's all coming together. We're actually starting. I mean, the room itself is now built. And now we're going in and we're doing
You're going to have to come back so you can see what it looks like when it's finished.
Yeah.
So it's going to be exciting, and we're hoping to have that done, like I said, by January. And so we're going to be bringing back Trinity Talk Live in some format. It might look different. We don't know yet. Our media team's talking about it, but it's going to be back next year, along with some other new shows. I mean, one thing that's going to be coming back also is Pocket Size Apologetics. For those that you remember that's going to have a little bit of different look to it. That's where just a really quick, 4 or 5 minute episode about something about answering and responding, answering for the faith, answering questions people have about the faith, 1 Peter 3:15, all that jazz, apologetic stuff. And there's talk about some other new things that might be coming too. I'm not going to spoil them. They're still in the early stages of production and development. But if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now's the time, because I can tell you we've got some really, really exciting things coming up very soon here. And not to mention, it's a church, so we've got some great worship services here. We got traditional worship. We got contemporary worship. We have some great Advent at home services coming up midweek.
Chapels.
Chapels, yeah, the midweek chapels from the school. We've got a middle school chapel and an elementary school chapel. If you have young ones, even if they're not enrolled here at Trinity, those are great worship opportunities for our young folks. So subscribe to the YouTube channel, because there's a lot on here for a lot of people. So, all right. For the last time, let's move on to our comments. What? I did not say anything about the live chat. You're right. I should say something about the live chat. Thank you. So if you've been waiting to change it, there you go. So yeah, seriously, if you're watching the show here, this is a conversational show, but not just between those of us who are here in the room. You are invited to be part of the discussion, part of the conversation. The way you do that is if you're watching us live, you leave a comment. We are currently live broadcasting on the Trinity Joppa YouTube channel and the Trinity Joppa Facebook page. You can type a comment in the live chat on YouTube or in the comment section on Facebook. Either one, when you do that, your comment will magically appear in that box over there to Ben's left. Also, if I hopefully will see it here on my screen in front of me. If I don't, our producer, my lovely wife, Mary Kay, will hold up one of those signs she was just frantically looking for to let me know that there is a comment on YouTube or Facebook. And as soon as we have a break in the conversation, I will go ahead and read it live here on the air, and we can interact back and forth. Now, normally what I say is, even if you're not watching us live, we do still want you to feel like you're part of the conversation. And so if you're watching this after the fact, you can still leave a comment in the comment section of the YouTube video, and then we would take those up at the start of next week's program, which I guess technically you could still do for this one. You're just going to be waiting a long time for an answer, like 2 months, okay, or so. But you can do it if you want to. But I just mentioned that because we did have a couple of comments on last week's show, and so I do want to take those up now. And these are both comments from Brian Brownell. Thank you again, Brian. And Brian, hey, thank you. You've been a great viewer of the show. Yeah, a loyal viewer. We really appreciate it, and participant. And one of his first comment here is when we were talking about Adele and her album that she released saying that, oh, I want this is for my son so he can understand, what I was going through and why I had to divorce his father. We won't go into the details of the story, but it was very much, her happiness was in her mind, the top priority. And here's what Brian Brownell said about it. He said, abuse, abandonment, infidelity. Happiness? Question mark.
One of these things.
Yeah, exactly. One of these things is not like the other. When you're an adult, what even is happiness? When you have children, what happiness can be found separate from your children's well-being? Amen. Right. I mean, that's kind of what we were saying last week. It's like, I don't get how you, as a parent, can, not just elevate your own happiness above that of your children, but to publicize it, to go and try to make all sorts of money off of creating a public album. It's like, you want your kid to understand what you're going through? Sit down and talk to your kid about it.
Right.
You don't make an album out of it and sell however many millions of copies, because I got news for you. Your kid's going to get teased in school. Right. It's going to happen, all right?
Well,
because of you.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and especially when she had voiced that her son was not happy with the decision. At that point, that should give you pause as a parent to say, okay, why is my son not happy? And let's, just like you're saying, sit down with him and talk about it. And I can't speak to how much thought went into it beforehand from Adele, but it doesn't seem like much because they weren't married for very long. And so, yeah, it's just all around not the best situation you want to put your child in.
No. And the other comment that Brian made here was, at one point I made a semi-joking comment about, how Christians sometimes get so caught up in our rights, not really realizing, we are servants of Christ. That's who we are. And I said, I got news for you. There's no such thing as a Christian Bill of Rights. Your freedom of speech and all this. Those freedoms are not Christian freedoms. Those are from the United States Constitution. But I said, there's no such thing as a Christian Bill of Rights. And so Brian Brownell just commented, Christian Bill of Rights, RITES.
I see what you did there.
I see what you did there.
Clever. That was clever.
That was clever. That was good. Give him credit for that. So anyway, those are our comments from last week. Thank you very much, Brian. We are going to move on now to our topics for this week. And our first topic is one that everybody's been talking about, and I am probably going to get angry about because that's what happens. So we're going to let Ben introduce it at least so we can postpone my anger a little bit. Go for it.
Yeah, we figured I would introduce this one with Ken being, and Mary Kay being the local movie producers here and directors. So in case you've been living under a rock and you haven't heard about the events on the set of Rust. Rust is a new movie that's been filming. It's a Western type movie starring Alec Baldwin, also produced by Alec Baldwin, the actor. And what had happened was on October 21st, during one of the film shootings sessions, it was a practice session for a action sequence involving a gun, a handgun. Alec Baldwin was given a gun that was supposedly a cold gun. Now in movie lingo, that's not loaded with actual bullets, more or less. Not loaded with anything, supposedly, or at least blanks. But he...
No, I think it's not supposed to be loaded with anything.
Cold gun means it's got nothing in it.
Okay, so cold gun meaning should not have had anything in it. And this was before they actually, I guess, began running the filming on that. But Mr. Baldwin pulled out the gun, shot what he thought was a blank or nothing at all. Ended up being an actual bullet that struck Helena Hutchins, who was a camera operator, and struck her in the chest, killing her. She died a couple hours after the incident at the hospital. And it also struck director Joel Souza in the shoulder. Now, he is okay. He'll recover, but he's injured. He's been seen in a sling. And so that was the incident that kind of
Okay, I'm sorry. Your byline says cinematographer, and I know I'm being picky here, but
I'll get to it when I'm talking. Yeah, she was the cinematographer.
okay.
I think was she operating the camera?
She was also operating the camera. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was not like huge budget film. Okay. So
yeah, it's described as an indie western.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a smaller budget. But yeah, so of course they cry out medic, and all this craziness happened. They transport Mrs. Hutchins to the hospital, where she then later passed away from her injuries. And there has been all sorts of discussion. I've got all sorts of articles here as to who's to blame, how this could have happened. typically, when you've got firearms on set, the task of checking to make sure that those are cold guns falls to the armorer on set and quartermaster, prop master. So that particular person is Hannah Gutierrez, and but she has spoken out saying that she has had a number of safety requests for the film that have been overruled. So they were kind of negligent, just the producers in general were negligent to her concerns for safety. Of course, that was her job to make sure things were safe. So the question still remains as to how that actually, those live rounds actually ended up being in the weapon. So there's an ongoing investigation as to that, but she did have some concerns that went unanswered there. And then also the assistant director, David Halls, has admitted, he acknowledged to investigators that he should have checked the weapon for live rounds before giving it to Mr. Baldwin, but he failed to do so. And this was according to a warrant affidavit, which was filed, I believe, last Wednesday. And so that's kind of it in a nutshell. There's a lot of questions surrounding this that are still unanswered, but I know you're chomping at the bit to kind of raise some questions of your own, so I'll kick it over to you.
What was the name of the guy who handed him the gun?
That was the assistant director,
David Halls.
Yeah, Halls was the last name.
David
Halls.
Yeah.
So you got between the time that the gun came out of the safe until it ended up in Alec Baldwin's hands, it passed through 3 other people's hands. There was a prop master, Sarah Zachary, who then handed it to the armorer or quartermaster, same thing.
Hannah
Gutierrez. And then Gutierrez gave it to Halls, the AD, who then gave it to Alec Baldwin. And Halls was the one who said, "This is a cold gun," to Alec Baldwin.
This is an indie set.
This is an indie set, yeah. I want to start out just by letting people know, a little bit of, what my background and Mary Kay's background. And obviously, I'm the media director here, so I know a thing or two about cameras and stuff. But we've done a number of film shoots, whether it be short films. I was just showing the media team yesterday our mutual appearances on
Oh, that's right.
House of Cards.
House of Cards.
And so we've been on film sets before. And and
more importantly, on indie films.
On indie films, a lot of indie films. And I want to give a shout out real quick to our friend Dylan Hintz. Not that I expect him to be watching because I didn't tell him I was going to be talking about him tonight. Dylan is a professional stunt performer. Really does a lot in the realm of fight choreography, things like that. And when he was just kind of getting started, he always says, he thanks us actually. We used to run a program up in Havre Grace, Maryland, where we had a film workshop, and we'd have different guests come in and teach every week different skills that involve in filmmaking, just a rough introduction. And he actually came in for a class we had on stunt work, and he did a lot of fight choreography and things like that. But he's kind of the one that really introduced us on set, because we'd worked on set with him before, to the importance of firearm safety. And
just safety in general.
Safety in general, but for the purpose of this story, talking about firearm safety and even prop firearms. And so it's to him that I credit a lot of even my knowledge in this area. And first of all, let me tell you something about Dylan. I would not mess with him in a million years. He would break me in half. And he's shorter than I am. I mean, he's not nearly as big, but he would break me in half. I mean, before I even saw it coming, he's so fast too. But he's a great guy. He's a fun guy, real fun guy to be around. But when it comes to his job on set, don't question, don't mess with it, because when it comes to things like firearms, then your quartermaster, for example, is, they are the ultimate authority, supposed to be the ultimate authority, that you don't question them. Even the director cannot contradict what the quartermaster is saying needs to be done with these firearms. Now, what's interesting, the number one rule on any set with any firearm, and this is true, keep in mind, most firearms that are on film sets are not real firearms. They are, but they're not. It's complicated. I'll explain in a minute. They're prop weapons. They may not be designed to fire an actual live round, but they still fire a projectile of some sort in order to create the muzzle flash and all of that. That's what blanks, things like that. Yeah. Even blanks are a projectile.
And you can get hurt from a blank.
You can get hurt from a blank.
If you look up, sorry, I always blank on his name. Brendan Lee.
Yeah.
In the production of The Crow. Right?
Yes, it was The Crow.
It was a good indie film. Yeah.
Yeah, but he got injured.
Yeah.
He died.
And then died. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Wow.
yeah, but I think it was an after, it wasn't like instantaneous. But yeah, so you can still, blanks are, don't ever say, oh, they're just blanks.
Well,
is my point.
purportedly, another person on this set of Rust shot themselves in the foot with a blank.
Yeah.
So this was
So-
not the only incident.
Well, and the weapons, the weapon at issue here was a real firearm. This was not, they call it a prop because it's used as a prop, but this was obviously a real firearm capable of firing live rounds. And, historic, but still a real firearm.
Yeah, you have to be careful about using the term prop because that means anything that an actor handles.
Yes.
So just because it's a prop doesn't mean it's
Look,
fake.
I'm going to make Ben into a prop. No, that's not how it works.
But
No, but-
but I'm no lie. Just because it's a prop doesn't mean it's fake.
Right.
A lot of times in theater it is, but a lot of times in film, it's still real things.
It's real enough, even if it's not
Sorry.
what you would consider an
Sort of
actual firearm
right.
capable of firing live rounds. But no, what I want to get at is the number one rule, if nothing else, is you always treat every firearm as if it's real and as if it's loaded, period. All right? And so, I mean, it does seem from what's coming out so far that out of everybody who handled that firearm, that perhaps Alec Baldwin was the least blameworthy, I guess, the whole situation. And I don't know exactly, we still don't know exactly what he did with that firearm that caused it to go off. We know they were rehearsing a scene that did involve aiming the weapon at the camera. Now, usually there's, various different safety measures between the firearm and the camera so that you can't actually penetrate
Well,
the
in fact, normally,
barrier.
even normally speaking, if if you're using firearms that are real, as in capable of holding live ammo, normally speaking, you don't get to touch that weapon until you're actually shooting.
Well, that's the other thing I
So,
was going to get
yeah,
to, is
so-
that ordinarily, even if you're rehearsing, you're not even rehearsing with the real thing. You're rehearsing with a rubber substitute or something like that. But you still, even a rubber substitute, you're supposed to treat it like it's a live weapon. And so that's the number one question is, what did Alec Baldwin do with it? Did he really treat it like it was a live weapon, like he should have?
Supposedly, in one of these articles, I don't remember which one, so I probably won't be able to find it right away, but to paraphrase, it was saying he, I guess, had it holstered and was going through the motions of what the scene was going to be. They weren't actually filming it. And he's like, so I just go like this and go bang. And that's basically the motion
That he did.
that
So,
ended up. Yeah.
and that may be, that may be. But then you also have, supposedly what happened is when they broke for lunch, all the guns that were used in the filming were put into the safe. However, the ammunition was left unsecured on another cart, and the detectives actually found 500 rounds of of ammunition, I should say, 500 rounds of ammunition, a mix of blanks, dummy rounds, and what appeared to be live rounds. First, let me say this. There is no reason whatsoever, zero, zilch, nada, for live rounds to ever be on a film set. Ever. All right? Even if you're using, like they were here, a real weapon capable of shooting live rounds, that's exactly why you don't have live rounds on the film set. So you can't, I mean,
Even if a rounds or the bullets or something is part of a prop, they're not real.
yeah, I mean, and the thing is,
Those aren't, and that's what we mean by live rounds. These, if you have rounds that are there as props, they wouldn't be live.
Right.
They wouldn't have the inner workings in order to do what needs to be done to be fired.
and I can't stress enough how much within the film industry, at least the circles that I've run in, these people would be persona non grata. Nobody's going to want to work with them again, which shocked me to hear that this particular AD had a previous complaint against him, or was the armor? I can't remember. One of them had a previous complaint against him on another set because, like, really, somebody else gave him a job because it's just this. There are certain, in any culture, there are certain things that are just so egregiously taboo that you're going to be completely shunned by the culture if you do them. In the filmmaker culture, this is one of them. I mean, gun safety, because when you abuse gun safety, you put a complete black eye on the entire industry. And people, we want to, as filmmakers, you want to assure the public that, yes, we do take this seriously. And I got news for you. If you don't know anything about the film industry and how many movies, TV shows, things like that use some kind of firearm in their storyline get made on a daily basis, you would know, yes, the safety is taken extremely seriously. But when something like this happens, this is what the public's going to focus on, rightfully so.
Yeah.
But that's why this is inexcusable. It's just
you're never gonna
inexcusable.
You're never going to hear about it if they do things right, because nothing eventful is going to happen.
Yeah, you shouldn't.
Right.
Just like if a stunt person does their job right, you won't even know that they were in the film, except for thanks to the credits.
Even with live rounds being present, which you're right, they never should have been present. I find it difficult to believe because it's easy enough to distinguish between a live round and a blank. There's no tip on the end of it. There's no actual projectile.
Well, and we don't know if everybody's telling the truth here. That's the other thing. There was a rumor, and I don't think this was confirmed, not to my knowledge, that some people were because this was a really cool historic Western weapon that was capable of shooting live rounds, that people were using it for like target practice in off hours. I don't know if that's true. When these things first happen, all sorts of rumors are circulating everywhere. Who knows? But if something like that is true, well, that again shows you an increased level of irresponsibility with it. And also probably shows why they had live rounds on the set, because they were taking them off and firing, using them in off hours in ways they shouldn't have been using.
So when we've used fake guns, they wouldn't even fire blanks. The ones we've used in some of the films that Ken and I have made. One of us acts as the quartermaster, and no one, not anyone, touches those until it's time to shoot those scenes. In fact, we don't even usually let them rehearse with them until we're almost about ready to shoot, like maybe the one last run through before we're allowed to shoot. And we don't, when they're not shooting, they go right back to me. Now we don't have, or Ken. Now we're shooting usually in other people's houses, so we don't lock them up. But I definitely keep them hidden from anybody else on the set.
They're not kept with the rest of the props. They're kept in their own location. In this case, they were kept in a safe, supposedly, which is what's supposed to happen.
And not only that, but when we are going to be using our fake, whatever type of gun they might be, I call the police, the local police, and I tell them, hey, between this time and this time, we're going to be shooting a film in and around this location. We have some people who are playing bad guys, or some people who are playing FBI. They will have guns on them that are, totally not real. Just to let you know. And the funny thing is that I remember making that phone call, and we were shooting on the weekend. And I think that whoever took the phone call didn't pass it on to everybody, or put it someplace prominent. So we were filming in and around a house, so we were outside too. And the neighbor called the cops, and we had a cop come, and I'm like, so I did make a phone call.
we had a scene where we had two people that were playing FBI agents, and they had firearms drawn, guns drawn, looking like they were about to go enter a garage. It was one of these detached garage, and there were just houses. There's a little alleyway, and there's houses right across, and somebody's like looking out their back window and seeing two people with guns trying to pound their way into some garage across the street. And it's like, no, this is why we cleared it ahead of time.
But again, they only ever have the guns in their hands also when the camera's going to see them. So if they are quote unquote holstered and nobody can see that, then you're not going to see that.
Even to a lesser degree, when we do the passion play, now there's no guns in that, but when the scene where Peter cuts off Malchus's ear, we had in the past a real blade that we've used, and when we're not doing that scene, that's always safely in the quartermaster's possession.
Although we do have lightsabers in the passion play.
That's true.
That's just one rehearsal night, though. Don't know what we're talking about?
Fairly easy to
come out for the passion play.
Fairly easy to distinguish a plastic lightsaber from a real one.
Shh, I didn't say plastic. That's one of the upgrades we made for this coming year. So you're leaving. You don't get to play. Sorry. Anyway, this is when I first saw the story. First of all, I thought of Dylan and Dylan's head exploding because he was going to be furious. But there is no way this happens without most likely multiple people not doing their job and not taking safety seriously. Because and even the AD admitted probably should have checked. Yes, you should have checked. You know, if you're the one, if you've taken the responsibility. First of all, the AD I don't think ever should have been the one to give the gun to Alec Baldwin. Anyway, that should have been from the armorer directly. But if the AD is taking that responsibility, then look, if you're the one giving the firearm to the actor, then you're the one who's responsible for making sure it is a cold gun. If that's what you're going to tell them, don't take someone else's word for it. You're the one actually handing it over. You need to check. You need to know. Matter of fact, every single person in that line who's handing it off should have checked. From the prop master to the quartermaster to the AD, every single one of them should have looked at that gun to find out if it was actually a cold gun or not before handing it to Alec Baldwin, and none of them did.
Yeah, clearly the ball was dropped several times.
Yeah.
Now the question remains: who's culpable? Who's most culpable? Do all of them
it could be
get
all of them.
charged?
There's going to be charges for involuntary manslaughter. It's going to happen.
And
each
when
person?
it comes down to it, there's like Ken was also saying, there's supposed to be, especially if you're firing at the camera people, you know, in their direction. Okay, there is supposed to be some shielding that is in front of them, so that not only do you not do damage to any of the people, but you also don't do any damage to any of the equipment. So that appears to have been missing. Now it's an indie film, so maybe, you know, they don't have the budget for that kind of thing. But I also have to ask myself, you know, even as an actor, you know, I think I would still check myself too if I knew it was
Yeah.
capable.
Well, if you're
of holding...
capable of it, I mean you
it-
don't expect the actors to be firearms experts.
No, but
But
I'm
the other-
thinking. I'm just thinking in terms of it. What you're telling me about the film, and the style of film. I'm thinking it was. My mind is just going to a 6-shooter where you can actually see the chambers.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think that was described in one of these, that they pulled open the barrel, spun it, and he only saw like 3 rounds in there. He should have checked all the rounds.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll tell you and here's where the Alec Baldwin question comes into play. Like you mentioned, the shielding that should have been between the firearm and the camera. Well, it's my understanding they were just setting up the shot, and that's why the director was right there, because the cinematographer had set up the shot. The director was coming and leaning on it over her shoulder to look and see what the shot was that she had set up. That's why he was in proximity and got hit himself. So it's possible they had that shielding. They were just still in the process of setting it up. If that's the case and it hadn't been set up yet, then that does call Alec Baldwin's actions into question about whether he should have been demonstrating when that shielding wasn't there yet. You know,
And even if it's a matter of, let's see if we're, you know, what is this going to look like as a shot? They're trained. Even a lot of, you know, actual police officers are trained to hold their gun in a certain way. Do you remember their finger isn't on the trigger,
Right.
Because they don't want to accidentally shoot somebody.
Always
So-
keep safety on. Now with a historic weapon, you might not have a safety,
Yeah.
but
No, but you're. I can't demonstrate it because I'm not on camera, Kent. You
come on
know,
over here.
No, you know what I'm talking about holding your fingers out to the
Hold your
side
fingers out and you're not on the trigger. Yeah.
and not curling this one around.
Mhm.
right.
It's laying alongside of the gun. So even if he was rehearsing, his finger somebody should have taught him to not put his finger on the trigger until.
I'm sorry. So we're watching this on Facebook, right? I'm watching the Facebook comments. And I left a post last night because I finally just finished watching This is going to seem like a side note. Bear with me for a second. I finished watching Superman and Lois, the TV series. And I loved it. I wasn't planning on watching it. I wasn't interested in it. And then I gave the first episode a shot when I started hearing all these positive reviews. And it got me hooked, and it was a great show. I'm not going to give my whole review right now. But I just saw these notifications I had. I clicked on my notifications while watching the show, and the top notification is someone who liked that post, and that someone was Dylan Hintz. So sorry. Let's say Dylan. Where are you? Oh, I just liked. He didn't comment, so I can't really respond. I was going to say I'm talking about you on air right now. So I could, but we're all done with the show about this topic. We're going to move on to the next one. By the time he tunes in, we'll be done talking about him. So anyway, but no, one last shout out to Dylan for teaching us everything he has taught us over the years. But no, inexcusable. Now I will say I did find it interesting. 2 things. I was watching one of the channels that I subscribe to, is John Campea. He's a movie pundit, commentator. But he did a little bit on this the other day, and he made two interesting points. One, that, in today's day and age, there's no reason you need actual firearms on a set anyway. I mean, they make, for example, airsoft type of weapons that resemble the mechanism of real live weapons that will look like they're actually firing, that they don't fire anything. They just fire air. Now they don't give
cheaper
you
to obtain also.
Well, yeah. Now they don't give you your muzzle flash, but with the advance of modern post production technology, you can add muzzle flashes in post very easily. So it's like, is there really any reason you need to even have anything that fires any kind of projectile on set? And he says no. And
explain what the airsoft, what they'll do that.
It's like a spring loaded.
It's like a spring loaded thing. So
No, I know, but why would you want to use that instead of like we use with the fake?
Well, because like
guns.
when you fire an automatic, now John Wilhelm better not be watching me because I'm going to mess this all up, and he's going to say that's not the right terminology. So I'll avoid any specific terminology. We'll call it the thingamabob and the other thing.
The who's what.
Exactly. So when you got an automatic weapon or a semi-automatic weapon, I should say. See, I've already messed it up. He's already getting it semi-automatic. All right. Think of a handgun. Not a revolver, but when you've got the whole top part, when you pull the trigger, in order to actually, when it's firing, it's firing the projectile that's in the chamber, and it's pulling another round from the clip up into the chamber. Well, the whole top mechanism comes back. You might not see this if you're not quick enough. Might flick back and come back forward again. And so you got to be careful. Don't put your thumb in the way. I saw somebody learn that lesson the hard way. So there's things like that real firearms do that you need to replicate if you're going to make this look real. But the muzzle flash, the actual fire that comes out the tip of the gun when a bullet is fired, that can be duplicated in post very easily. And so there's really not necessarily any reason why you need to have real projectiles being fired at all on set.
That's a good point.
Robert Koger here on YouTube says, and people are going to blame the weapon for this versus the lack of knowledge of basic gun safety. Potentially. Yeah. Maybe this is going to sound really, how do I phrase this without sounding really bad? I have not seen as many people doing that in this scenario. And I suspect if it's because the same people who tend to make those arguments also, let's just say, tend to be involved in this particular industry. So, it's like we want to blame others and when they do something wrong, but when one of ours does something wrong, all of a sudden it's not the gun, it's the person. So, yeah, that's as political as I'll get on that. But yes, I think everybody gets my point, because I really haven't seen too many people, Robert. I thought the same thing you did when this story first came out. But I really haven't seen too many people talking about this being a gun control issue because it's a Hollywood film set.
Well, and think of the logical conclusion. You start banning guns on movie sets, then you're effectively killing off a whole genre of movie.
Yeah, more than multiple genres, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't. Part of me is I'd be open to people that know more about these airsoft firearms than I do to tell me why I'm wrong. But when I heard John Campea making this argument, I tended to agree with him. I don't see why we even need to have any projectiles being fired on set. The other thing he asked, or one of his viewers asked that he answered, was, what do we think about whether they should finish the movie or not? Because you go back, for example, to The Crow that Mary Kay talked about earlier, where Brandon Lee was killed on set. They did go back and finish that film. Now, The Crow was much further along in production than this was. And this is probably only like halfway shot. So how do you go back? Do you really go back and do it again? And what John Campea said, and again, I tend to agree with him on this one, is even though they did it for The Crow, the answer here, he thinks, is probably no. They don't finish the film. Because number one, The Crow is 1996, I want to say, 1990s,
somewhere in there.
Before the advent of today's modern social media, and so now social media has gathered hold of this Rust film dramatically. There is no way, if this film were to be finished and it were to come out, there's no way to separate it in the minds of potential viewers from this tragedy. None.
What about what happened with The Dark Knight, though, with Heath Ledger? That
happened after it was released. Oh, with Heath Ledger passing away, right?
Yeah,
right,
and that was kind of, almost some of the, I hate to say it this way, but almost some of the allure. Like people were like, oh, this was Heath Ledger's last film,
Right.
so they did go out to watch.
But his death was not directly related to the production of the movie.
That's true.
And that's a little bit different.
Yeah.
And so number one, I just don't think you want your film associated with that. Number two, I don't think, especially considering this is a little indie film to begin with, it was not going to get a wide release, nationwide release and all of that. It's going to significantly, just purely from a business standpoint for a moment, if I'm a producer of this film, I say, you know what, I'm going to lose a lot of money by cutting, not finishing this film, probably going to lose more if I try to pay more to finish it and release it,
Yeah.
So anyway, all right, no, I'm not going to use that now.
No.
You know what I was going to say? I realized, nope, let's not use that.
We've talked this one
colloquialism.
enough.
Yeah, let's just move on to the next story. How about we say that?
Sure.
Our next story here, let me get rid of all of these pages. I did not staple my pages today, so that's why everything's like staggered to make sure I can keep them straight. I'm going to drop this whole page, and then I'm just going to say, I'm done. Ben, you got to talk to us because I can't keep track of any of the stories. No, our next story tonight comes out of the city of Portland, Oregon. The Portland City Council has issued a new policy giving some of its the city employees bereavement leave. This is a good thing, right? Bereavement leave. We like bereavement leave. Bereavement is a good thing. People need to grieve, right?
It is.
And and this bereavement leave, it covers things like miscarriage. That's great. Someone has a miscarriages aren't great. That sounded wrong. You know what I mean? But giving some bereavement leave who's gone through a miscarriage is certainly something that I think miscarriage and stillbirth are things that they offer bereavement for. But there's also a third thing that's included in this category, not just for miscarriages and stillbirth, but they also offer 3 days of bereavement leave for anyone who has had an abortion. And this is one of those times when you just wonder, it's like, are you thinking? Connect the dots, okay? What is bereavement leave? I'll let you comment on it.
Yep.
But Andrea Miller, who's the president of the National Institute for Reproductive Health, supported this policy from Portland City Council, saying that she hopes it could help destigmatize abortion. Pin. Yeah, I think they're that. And then she goes on to say, it's important to recognize that employees need time to address their reproductive health needs, and they may need time to process what they're experiencing. A policy like this is a really important step forward in providing that kind of support to employees and in recognition of the fact that we aren't just robots.
Pin.
Yeah, another pin there too. You know what? I'm not going to say what Gabriel Vance, the director of external affairs for Created Equal, said, because that's kind of getting into the commentary on it, and so I'll let you dive into that. But yes, so this new policy does offer 3 days of bereavement leave for city employees who have suffered from a miscarriage, stillbirth, or an abortion. Ben?
Can I just say that before we do what is obvious,
Or should have been
obvious.
okay, and say all the stuff that, should have been obvious, I just want to throw it out there that if a woman has a tubal pregnancy, and that pregnancy, for the sake of her health, and it's not a viable pregnancy, has to be ended, technically speaking, that woman is having an abortion. Okay. So bereavement leave seems appropriate potentially for that situation, but I would say they've had a medical procedure and therefore also need to have.
You are talking about less than 1% of all abortions.
I am completely aware of that, and I'm just going to take it right off the table from anybody who wants to comment further, because they don't specify, is my understanding. They don't specify that it's that type of situation that is happening.
No, and I like the policy. I'm all in favor of the policy. I just kind of want to say hello, McFly. Sorry.
Right. Well, actually, the situation that you're talking about, Mary Kay, is not so different from the situation that kind of led to this policy being implemented. Because it says, Michelle Rodriguez, a senior policy advisor in Commissioner Mingus's MAP's office, spoke with an employee who had not accrued any time to take off after a pregnancy loss. Here's what she said. Essentially, she took days off without pay to deal with both her physical reaction to what ended up being a medical termination with her doctor's help and the emotional and physical and psychological impact of what happened. So it was a medical termination that this woman had to have. Effectively, what you're talking about, I don't know if it was tubal or ectopic or any kind of other emergency termination, but effectively that's the
But this policy does not sort of make that distinction, right?
right. It
Correct?
kind of blankets miscarriage, stillbirth, and abortions.
I mean,
kind
but
of all together.
abortions for any reasons.
For any reason, yeah, it does not
Yeah.
go into the reasoning.
Okay.
Yeah. So I
That's
guess-
more. I just wanted to throw out there that's what we're discussing.
right. Yeah, this is, and yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Ken. Is that I think it's a great policy.
I didn't
actually.
say. Oh, that part. Yes, I did say that. Sorry,
Yeah.
I was about to say I didn't say anything. I left it to you to say.
But no, I think it is a great policy that absolutely time should be taken off. Full disclosure, Katie and I, we went through a miscarriage between our oldest and our middle child, and it's emotionally taxing. There's a lot of it is a bereavement period, and so I think it's absolutely appropriate to have that, even for abortion. And this is where we get into the commentary of it. And
Sorry,
I
there's
will
a pin
pick up-
over here. I think I'm going to take this out real quick. There you go.
There you
It's
go.
out.
So yeah, like you said, you skipped over Gabriel Vance. He's the director of external affairs for the pro-life group Created Equal. And really, I can't say it any better than he does. He says, the policy is a tacit admission that a life was lost. Hello, McFly. By giving bereavement leave for abortion for any reason, yes, the reasoning that you bring up, Mary Kay, yeah, that's less than 1%, but that's absolutely appropriate there. But yeah, in any other abortion case, they're tacitly admitting that this is a loss of life, therefore it deserves bereavement leave. Yeah. And the connection has to be made there that the psychological turmoil that person is experiencing would not be experienced if we were, like they said up here, we were just robots. And the life was just a clump of cells.
Mm-hmm.
Where would be the need?
You don't offer bereavement leave when someone has a kidney taken out.
Exactly. Or passes a kidney stone, or
Yeah.
exactly. Or any other clump of cells is removed. A biopsy. There's no bereavement there,
Right.
because there's no life lost there. And the comment about destigmatizing abortion kind of goes back to that. Like,
How does it destigmatize? If anything, it stigmatizes, because if the policy is acknowledging, like you say, it's acknowledging that there is a life that was lost. If anything, that's going to stigmatize abortion, not destigmatize, because it's saying that it's ending a life. We have a comment from Matthew Calvillo. It says, abortion hurts women. There's a couple, I'm not sure exactly how you're going out. There's a couple of ways that I could agree with you on that. Number one, obviously, and as some of this policy even seems to acknowledge, that for many women, and some would say not all, I'm not even going there, I don't think you have to prove that, but for many women, indisputably, going through an abortion carries an emotional toll and has emotional harm upon the woman. That's why you need bereavement leave to get through that, to help get through that. The other way that I would say that abortion, I would say more the abortion industry, is kind of insulting to women in my mind. And I'm not a woman, so you can say what you want about that. But the fact of the matter is, we hear all the time the argument that we need to have abortion in order to succeed, basically in order for women to actually succeed in the workplace. And tell that to Amy. Yes, tell it to Amy Coney Barrett. It's like, and that's just one of countless examples. It's like, it's so ridiculous. Tell it to my wife. We've had kids, and she's working. It's like, seriously, it seems so insulting to me to say to women, oh, you're great, but if you have kids, you clearly can't handle working too, and you can't handle advancement in your
Why can't
career.
we say that to men?
Why not? I mean, you're right. Why can't we say it? Why is it that it's because it's also sexist and assuming that women are but then you also have men abandoned and blah. I'm not going to go, but you're right. And so it stigmatizes women to say they're not strong enough to both raise children and succeed in a career. And I think that's insulting,
Right.
Yeah,
if anything, maybe we should have more time for families to spend together, you know? And going also to that comment, Mr.
Calvillo, I think it is.
Calvillo, you said, so not only is abortion harmful emotionally and spiritually to women, physically too. Like, you look at emergency DNCs without going into, without getting graphic or anything, there's the physical process is damaging to the reproductive organs, the uterus, and there's actually a greater statistical likelihood after someone's had an abortion that they will have further complications in future pregnancies should they decide to get pregnant again. And so there's physical considerations for future pregnancies when somebody's had an abortion. And so, yeah, I think a policy like this, I think they do need time off. I think it's absolutely appropriate to give them bereavement leave and time to heal because it is a medical procedure. But at the same time, think about what message it's sending.
Yeah, I know. And I know there are people that'll be, pro-choice that will say that, that pro-lifers oversimplify the things when it comes to their arguments that, you don't need to, even if it's not a life, even if it's just a clump of cells, it's still an emotionally difficult time for a woman to choose because they'll say it's still a potential life. It's a hard decision. There's still things that she needs to process to get through because no woman arrives at the decision to have an abortion easily. I mean, I think that's also overgeneralizing. That's not true. I mean, there are some that, do arrive at it quite easily, and there's others that don't because we're all individuals. We process things differently. The problem here is, though, that this isn't just some policy that says, well, you've had some emotionally trying experience, therefore you need some time off.
Right.
This is a policy that specifically says it's bereavement leave.
Right.
I mean, bereavement is for a loss of life. All right. And so it's
terminology.
Like the fact that you're categorizing it as this, if you want to have some other policy, that, for emotional trying circumstances and we'll give you 3 days off, okay, fine. But that's not what they did. Yeah. And again, I agree with the policy. I think it's a great policy. It's one of those jaw-dropping moments like, do you really not see what you just did?
Why not call it a mental health leave or something?
Yeah, exactly. But by calling it a bereavement leave, it's like, you are acknowledging that it's whether you want it to or not. That's what you've done.
It's correct.
It's correct. We agree with you. Yes. Yeah. That's why we agree with the policy. So anyway, that's one of those things that make you go, what? I'm sorry.
Exactly. It's one of those, it's just baffling that nobody seems to, on the pro-choice side, make those connections, connect those dots here.
So, all right, let's move on to our third story, shall we, sir?
Sure.
What is our third story?
All right. So you may have heard of author, at least in the Christian circles, may have heard of author Eric Metaxas. He has written several books. Most recently, his newest book is called Is Atheism Dead? Taking a spin off of a 1966 article asking, is God dead? But he's written other books, such as one on Bonhoeffer. Actually, shout out to the other Ken, Ken Brown, did a Bible study recently on that very book, Eric Metaxas' book on Bonhoeffer, which was a good Bible study itself. I don't know, was that one recorded?
It was not.
Okay, no, it wasn't recorded, so you can't go back and watch it, but it's a good one. But anyway, Eric Metaxas, he's an author and obviously Christian author. Giving the reasoning, basically, in this new book, Is Atheism Dead? Pointing to recent discoveries in science that point to the existence of God, that are leaving even atheists to a point where they have to make either a very extreme logical disconnect or, making them go, these are things we can't quite reconcile in science, which has led Mr. Metaxas to actually create the bold statement that says that science is atheism is incompatible with science. In his book, he basically has this position that atheism is not compatible with science in regards to the recent developments in science that we've seen, things that are so precise, so finely tuned, whether it's cosmologically or just the universe, the way everything works, even down to a cellular level. Just constant discoveries in the last century that we've seen that really point to the existence of a intelligent design, basically, is what the argument is. So it's not really anything new per se, but he's kind of packaging it in this way and posing that provocative statement that atheism is incompatible with science in regards to at least genuine scientists who are supposed to be getting at the truth and not interpreting that truth in their own worldview. Basically, if you start with the presumption that there is no God, then what do you do? What do you do with certain discoveries like this? It's something that's so fine-tuned. How do you maintain that position when you've got evidence staring you in the face to the contrary?
Yeah.
And so that's basically his argument throughout this book. I don't think it's released yet, is it?
I'm not sure.
But or it's being released soon.
Well,
but-
it's recently published, so maybe.
Okay,
it just
so
came
maybe
out,
it is. Yeah. But he talks about, he says he hopes his new book will prompt the church to, quote, wake up and fight for the faith. Speaking of, kind of like what he said in the Bonhoeffer book, he said that the church was slow to wake up. And he said it's a model of what not to do. If we don't wake up and fight, a lot of Christians have bad theology that says, I'm not supposed to fight. He says, not only is that not biblical, that's demonic. He says, God pulled us to fight evil. He calls us to fight on our knees in prayer, but also calls us to fight in all kinds of other ways. Speaking of, speaking out for the faith. First Peter 3:15.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Tim Foster here on Facebook says, God's word covers everything we need to know. Psalm 14, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. I'll pull out Romans 1:20. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. And so that's kind of, that Romans 1:20 verse is a big one for people like, myself and Eric Metaxas, who will look at the natural world, which you can discover truths about through scientific inquiry, and says, look, if you are, properly done, and you're not letting your presuppositions unduly influence you, then yeah, you're going to see that this all points to God. This all points to a creator. The evidence is pretty overwhelming. And it is overwhelming. Now, of course, nowadays we live in a society where any evidence that people bring up, especially in the realm of science, that they say points to God, is just immediately discredited, almost with a schoolyard bully approach. It's like, well, no, you're shamed into. We're so many responses to whether it be the intelligent design movement or things like that are really grounded more in just name calling than they are actually addressing the merits of the argument. Or they're straw men. What they'll do is they'll create a straw man version. Like, for example, and I'm not going to get into the Darwinian evolution debate right now, other than to say this. It's often misrepresented. The intelligent design movement's position on Darwinian evolution is often misrepresented by people in the popular media or scientific community, where they'll say they don't even believe in evolution whatsoever. Well, no, that's not what the argument says. You've got evolution just meaning colloquially change over time. Well, we all evolve. I don't look the same way I did 20 years ago. I've evolved. Okay.
Right.
Then you've also got
macro versus micro.
Micro versus micro is the big one. You got microevolution, which is change within a species, and then macroevolution is where you're talking about one species changing into another. The argument is that microevolution, everybody agrees with it. Everybody agrees with that, all right? The question is whether macroevolution. Now, you may think macroevolution is true. You may think it's not true. But what you should not do is misrepresent what your opponent, so to speak, is saying to make it look like they're denying all evolution. And I say Christians do this too. I can't tell you how many times I'll be in Christian communities and people will say, I don't believe in evolution. Really? Because I guarantee you, whoever you're relying upon, you're hearing that from, probably does agree with evolution on a micro scale. Right. It's really not a macro scale. And so that's the culture that we're living in right now. Whereas I agree with Eric Metaxas that there is a lot of evidence out there, whether you're talking about the evidence of irreducible complexity in the realm. Tim Foster says micro versus macro. He was getting there, right? We were getting there. Yeah, it was a 30-second delay or whatever you just said. But yeah, absolutely, Tim. So whether it be the irreducible complexity, where you've got think of the game Mousetrap. You ever play the game Mousetrap, where you've got you flick the boot into the stop sign, and that caused the ball to do this, and then this, and this, and this, and then and one thing leads to another, and eventually the cage drops on top of the mouse. Well, if you take any one piece out of that mousetrap, the whole thing is useless. It won't work. And that's the thing. There's a lot of things in our bodies that work the same way. You've got to have all of the pieces of the mechanism in place simultaneously, or the whole mechanism is useless. Well, what the irreducible complexity argument says is that's just not possible in an evolutionary
happenstance.
Right. Yeah. Random happenstance, or even just a gradual progression that the macroevolutionary theory would require, because it's not like you can get just piece 1 and piece 2 and piece 3 and then gradually work your way up till you have all 15 pieces. Because as long as you only have piece 1 or 2, it's a useless machine. It does nothing. And so it's going to be weeded out by natural selection. And you have to have all 15 coming together, and I'm just picking the number 15, all come together simultaneously at the same time in order for it to work. And that's just statistically impossible. And I know there's people that say, well, they borrow from this, that. I'm not going to get into all the arguments about that. But this is the kind of thing that Eric Metaxas is talking about. But what I want to hit on is, even if we don't want to get into all these intricate arguments about, intelligent design or irreducible complexity or all this kind of stuff, or cosmology and the design argument in the cosmos, even fundamentally, all right, in order to do science, you have to make certain starting assumptions. You have to, all right? And those starting assumptions are incompatible with a view that there's no God. I mean, they only make sense if God is in the picture. And here's the biggest one. Let's say that I want to conduct a scientific experiment, all right? And I want to see what's going to happen when I throw I'm going to throw this ball. Here we go. I want to throw this ball up into the air, okay? So we're going to do an experiment, right? Now, this is your first scientific experiment here. What's going to happen when I throw this ball up into the air? You can guess online, but I guarantee with a 30-second delay, it will already have been completed before you do. But go ahead. So I'm going to throw this in the air. Ready? Here we go. Oh, look. Gravity. It came down because of gravity. So let me ask you, what is going to happen now if I throw this ball into the air again?
It's going to fall back down again.
But are you sure? Why do you know that?
Because it's happened time and time again.
Oh, see, you've just made an assumption. You have made an assumption that we live in a universe that operates predictably.
Yep.
That is, something happens one way one time, and when exposed to the same conditions again, it's the same thing is going to happen again. Well, why did you assume that? There is no reason, if there's no intelligence behind the universe, to think that the universe would behave that way.
Right.
None. But science requires that the universe behave that way. That makes perfect sense if it was designed by God, who wants us to learn more about him and wants us to investigate the universe. But if it's all just time plus matter plus chance, there's no reason to believe that the universe should necessarily behave that way. It doesn't have to.
Right, to follow certain laws of nature.
Right.
There has to be a lawgiver. Just like with the moral law, there's natural law. And also another thing that he hits on here is there's also a degree of, in the scientific community, at least modern scientific community, of a little bit of historical revisionism that edits out basically that the scientific movement came about from Christians.
Yep.
It began in Christian movements with the assumption, therefore, that God was behind all of these natural laws and everything like that. And so it was an effort to explore those natural God-given laws. And yet now modern scientists, the modern scientific community in general, I'm not going to say every single scientist out there because that would be painting with a broad brush, but there's a overwhelming majority that tend to forget that conveniently and go the opposite direction.
And say science is incompatible with Christianity. No, it's not. And I mentioned the example of, I believe it was Copernicus in the sermon that I gave recently. Ptolemy had proposed a model for how the universe worked, and it was geocentric, meaning that the Earth was at the center of everything, and everything revolves around the Earth. But it required so much fudging with the numbers, and it was just so sloppy, basically, that Copernicus looked at it and said, that makes no sense, because God is a God of order. This does not look like something that would have been created by God. And so that's what led him to design a heliocentric model where the planets are orbiting around the sun. And so people forget that it was his faith in God and wanting to investigate and learn more about God's creation that inspired the entire scientific endeavor. That's what science that's what started the scientific movement. Modern science came out of Christianity and Christian universities and things like that.
Yeah.
So now some people would argue, well, then, but once we found out more about science, that may have been what started out, what motivated to begin with, but then we learned so much that now we know it's not compatible with Christianity. And what Eric Metaxas is saying, what I'm saying is that's just not true.
Right.
That's just not true. If anything, quite the opposite is true. Robert Koger here says, didn't even Darwin believe in God? I think I heard that somewhere. Not sure.
I think it was Hawkins, maybe.
Well, okay. Hawking is what you're thinking of. He didn't actually believe in God. He made Hawking in his book, oh my gosh, was it The Grand Design? I thought it was the one before. I don't think it was The Grand Design. No, that was the one at the end of his life. Oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank on it. It was one that kind of made him popular. Stephen Hawking.
Hawking, yeah.
I've got it on my bookshelf at home. Matter of fact, I probably have my bookshelf here. So most of my apologetic books are here. Look for Stephen Hawking. No, my apologetic books are at home. Never mind. It's not here. But he made a comment in his book about, if we I can't remember exactly what the context was, but it's like, well, we don't know X, Y, or Z, but here's what we know. But if we knew this, then we would know the mind of God. It's kind of like how he closed his book. And so, well, it's like, yes, that's actually quite literally true. He went on later on to say that he was just speaking of that, colloquially. He wasn't actually meaning it literally.
What did you think? There is a book that he wrote called The Grand Design.
Yes, but that was later in his life. It wasn't the Grand Design.
A Brief History of Time.
A Brief History of Time. Thank you. That was the one. Yes, A Brief History of Time. Great book, by the way. Great book. I love that book. But he made that comments. People, the Grand Design was not a good book. That's when he started trying to philosophize while saying the philosophy was dead. Then he went on to philosophize. It was, this is why you don't have scientists be philosophers. But Darwin himself, I want to say no. I could be wrong on that. I don't think Darwin. Now, keep in mind, we're talking the 1800s here, where there were very few people who would openly say they were atheists necessarily. But Darwin clearly was proposing a theory that was in contradiction to, for example, William Paley, who was kind of prior to Darwin. William Paley's clockmaker analogy and argument was the prevailing wisdom at the time, even in the scientific community. And that's the idea that if you're walking along a random path in the woods somewhere and you come across a watch, you're not going to look at that watch and think that it's just there by chance or by as a matter of nature. You're going to recognize the intricacies of it and say it must have come from a watchmaker. And Darwin was, and of course that watchmaker would be God. And that was the problem. And that's still a good argument, mind you. But then Darwin very much knew that he was challenging the prevailing thought process.
Everything I can find on Darwin, and granted it's, my quick search, which does include Wikipedia, so take this with a grain of salt, shows that Darwin grew up, he was baptized in the Church of England, that he was actually going to Cambridge to become an Anglican clergyman. But
somebody say Darwin?
Really?
Hey. Pastor Jay.
Come in.
We will miss you. Goodbye. Love you. See you later. I got 30 kids. I got to go entertain. Entertain the rest of the world. Okay. Bye.
Well, there you go.
We had a party crasher on
Yes, we had a It does say that he did become later in his life critical of the Bible as being considered history, and whether or not wondering why all religions could not be equally valid. However,
pinning that for our next story. Sorry.
Yeah. However, there is a story that was published later. Trying to think of when he passed, but like how far after his death.
I think something. I remember him.
There was there was something that was published much later after his death. It was about 30 years or so after his death, that claims he came back to Christianity on his deathbed.
There's another claim that he doubted his own theory of evolution.
Well, no, that's actually I think written in one of his papers, saying that
that's one of his papers. They actually did have the comment about if it could ever be shown that any part of the biology basically could not have developed through a gradual progression, then this would disprove my theory, essentially, is what he said. And that's actually the basis for Stephen Meyer's recent book, Darwin's Doubt. And that's kind of what he's referring to, is that comment made by Darwin and saying, well, it has been shown now through like irreducible complexity, through the information, the influx of new information necessary in DNA to create more complex organisms and things like that.
All right. Well, full disclosure, the claims that this story made that he reverted to Christianity were denied by his children. So most historians don't hold to that fact that he reverted back to Christianity. So in answer to
Robert, I'm sure you've heard that somewhere.
I'm sure part of his life he believed in God, but from the sound of it,
no, there's a phenomenon. Everybody wants to claim famous people for their side, so to speak. So, all right.
Let's just say that I don't think he ever really had. He's quoted as saying, or he wrote actually saying, "I have never been an atheist in the sense of denying the existence of God. I think that generally an agnostic would be the most correct description of my state of mind."
All right. So let's move on to our last story, fourth and final
Mm.
topic. Sorry, see what I know. I just wanted to make my wife cry. So she's gonna kill me later. I didn't say that. Don't play back the audio. It's a stable story. How about that? It's not going up. It's not going down. It's here. it's a here story. So, all right, but this is an article that was actually written by Christopher Schilin. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. Assistant professor of practical and political theologies at the Starr King School for Ministry, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. Which he describes as a Unitarian Universalist seminary, okay, is where he's a professor of theology. And this is, I want to read this one because I do want to hear your comments because you're probably more familiar with some of this background than I am, but and maybe you're not, and I just set you up. But basically his premise is he takes a look at people today, what we colloquially call the nuns. You know, you're seeing an increase in the nuns.
N-O-N-E.
N-O-N-E-S. Yeah, the nuns, people that do not identify with any particular religious tradition. Hence, none. If you're filling out a census form, are you Christian? Are you this? Are you that? Are you none? They're nuns. Okay. Or what many of these people in this group describe themselves as spiritual but not religious, or SBNR, because we have to abbreviate everything. I mean, you can't even pronounce that. Sibner. I mean, I don't know why. Just Sibner. Just spiritual but not religious. We've all heard people like that. You probably, a lot of them have friends. I've got a lot of friends like that say I'm spiritual but not religious. I don't, for one reason or another, I don't believe in the religious institutions, the churches, but I still have my own spirituality. And he says here that in his work as a professor of theology at this Unitarian Universalist in multi-religious seminary, he says, I see many students who fit within this SBNR mold. They are studying to become chaplains, interfaith ministers, and social activists. There's so many pins. I'll just pin the whole story. But what he tries to say is that these people, these spiritual but not religious, have a lot of similarities to a group of so-called radical reformers who split off 500 years ago from Martin Luther's Reformation. Martin Luther, somebody that we have some connection to here at this Lutheran church. So he goes on to talk about, what do people mean when they're describing themselves as spiritual but not religious? They generally mean that they are seeking or they're experiencing some kind of connection with a greater reality. But when they say they're not religious, they mean that kind of for them means belonging to a particular group that has particular doctrines and rituals. So they're looking for something greater, but they don't want to belong to one of these particular groups. Well, he's looking back to 1528. In 1528, there was a Lutheran pastor named Sebastian Frank, who, according to this article, had decided he was done with organized religion. He was bothered by what he saw as being the moral failures of many professing Christians, and so he resigned from the pulpit. And what he decided then was he declared that the true church, all right, is the invisible fellowship of people, okay, the invisible church, all right? With every falsehood, there's a seed of truth. I think is that the way it always works?
Yep.
But then he goes on, he says, but these people are instructed not by the Pope or of the Bible, but by the divine spark within. So they get their enlightenment from within, okay? It was the start of a form of Protestantism that was called the spiritualists or the spiritual reformers. And what mattered most to these people was their personal, direct encounter with God. And so what Professor Schilin is arguing here is if you compare the spiritual but not religious people today with these radical reformers that grew out of the spiritualist movement 500 years ago, you see a lot of commonalities. You see both of them are upset with what they see as the ethical failings in the church. They're upset by the exclusivism of religious communities. I'm going to put a pin in that because I'm going to come back to that one. Both groups emphasize the responsibility of the individual to, as he puts it here, to follow their own spiritual quest, and both believe that an authentic experience of God or ultimate reality is available to all people, regardless of their specific beliefs. Doesn't matter what you believe, you can have a genuine religious experience, or not religious, or genuine experience of the divine. Now, he does put the caveat at the very end, but we got to concede that the spiritualists still at least identify themselves as Christian. They still believe that Jesus Christ was the authoritative revealer of truth, which is certainly different from our spiritual but not religious people today, who just kind of make themselves, I guess, the authority of truth when it comes to that kind of thing. So, Ben, what do you think about this connection that he's trying to make?
I think it's a tenuous connection. But even so, the spiritualist movement back there, I don't think that they were, again, he does go on to say here that the spiritualists never really formed themselves into any kind of organized group because of their distrust of organized religion. And so they're not typically, when you think of reformers, the Reformed Church, the Lutherans, the Zwinglians, Anabaptists, they all were trying to reform the organized religion because of precisely those things like the hypocrisy of the religious leadership. I mean, that's an age-old problem that has gone back because of sin, and so the danger in this, even for the spiritualists, and especially today for the spinners, the spiritual but not religious, the danger in that is the subjectivism and claiming that we all contain the divine spark while rejecting Christ. That's rank heresy, honestly. To say that Christ is not the way, the truth, and life when he clearly says that he is. That's a rejection of the Bible, and so you cannot rightly call yourself Christian. Even the spiritualists, by rejecting or seeing the Bible as redundant, as this professor puts it, that it only serves to verify what we all know to be true within. Well, again, that's subjective truth. That's really postmodernism concealed in kind of religious terms. But very clearly, that's a major pillar of the Christian faith. Sola scriptura. You throw out the Bible, then you're throwing out sound doctrine. The Bible is useful. It's God breathed. It's useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting. And so we need that. And the danger of throwing that out is you get people who are spiritual but not religious and claiming that we are all following multiple paths to the same summit. And that's that age old, we've said it, I believe, on this program before, that, when all faiths are equal, then none of them are. When all faiths are true, then none of them are. You've got to compromise so much of true Christianity when you take that claim, when you take that stance, that effectively you're cutting it off at the source, and you're denouncing Christianity, true Christianity. And so, to make that claim, I guess there's some similarities in their distrust of organized religion, which is why the spiritualists never really had churches to speak of. But still, even in that, like he concedes at the end here, they still claim to believe in Christ as the sole authority. But today it's even more dangerous, where there's this pluralism, this religious pluralism, I think, that's seeped in, and it really can't rightly be called any kind of. And so pulling out that pin of saying that there are chaplains, interfaith ministers, social activists. Again, one of those things is not like the others anyway. But how do you rightly have a chaplain, or what exactly is an interfaith minister? That's just so devoid of the true meaning of what it is to be a minister. We've lost that meaning when you take out.
What are you ministering?
Exactly. What are you are you minister of? You're not a minister of the gospel if you're denouncing the gospel. So what are you a minister of? You're a minister of religious pluralism and subjective humanism.
Do you believe in the law of gravity?
Well, we just demonstrated, I guess, by making that assumption. Yeah.
So that's yes. Did you know that 200 years ago people also believed in the law of gravity?
Yeah.
Okay, so what? I mean,
No.
That's kind of my reaction when I read this story. I was like, so we're basically saying that there's a group of people today that have some beliefs in common, not all beliefs, but some beliefs in common with a group of people from 500 years ago.
So what?
Newsflash, water, wet, news at 11. I mean, it's like, seriously. It's like, So what? It's like what are you trying to say? So yes, there's some commonalities there, and even at your own article later on, you say that but no, not all commonalities. It's like, all right, so I just didn't see the point. I kept waiting for the punchline, but the punchline was that they have some beliefs in common.
Nothing else.
Nothing else. It's like where I kept reading, it's like, well, where are you going with this? What conclusion do you want us to draw from the fact that they had some similar beliefs? And there was no conclusion. The conclusion was they had some similar beliefs. So what? You know what? There's people today that have similar beliefs, and there's people that have similar beliefs to people hundreds of years ago. And I'm sure there's going to be people 200 years from now that have similar beliefs to what we talk about on the show. So what? And they're going to agree with some of what we say. They're going to disagree with other parts. There's no conclusion. So the whole article seemed kind of pointless to me, to be honest with you. I'll get to my second point here, but we did have Jeanette Harrington.
Hey, Jeanette.
Who says, not related to the current topic of discussion, but I just wanted to say before this program ends one thing. Ben, congratulations on your lead pastor position at St. Andrews. The congregation there is very blessed to have you. You will be truly missed at Trinity. Wishing you and your family only the very best.
Aww.
Jeanette, that's always the topic.
Thank you, Jeanette.
I mean, heck, Pastor Jay just busted in on us. We were talking about something else to say. So no, yes, you are going to be very missed.
Well, likewise, I'll miss all of you. And thank you, Jeanette. That was very kind.
So, but the other point I wanted to make about this particular story, and this was the thing where it says one of the similar beliefs that they're saying both groups have is this fact that they are repulsed by the exclusivism of religious communities. Let's define our terms for a minute so we're not talking like having some big philosophical discussion that nobody follows, okay? An exclusive belief just means you're saying, I believe I'm right and you're wrong, okay? And therefore, Christians say we believe Jesus is our Lord and Savior. Jesus died for our sins. And in any other worldview that denies that, we think they're wrong, okay? So we are exclusive in that regard, all right? And, other worldviews, like Islam's going to say that God is, for example, Islam will say that to give God any kind of human attributes whatsoever is blasphemous. It's what they call shirk, the most unforgivable of sins. And if you think that, you could just say that God came in human flesh, the form of Jesus Christ, you're wrong. I mean, that's what they say. It's an exclusive belief. I'm right, you're wrong. That's all exclusivism means. So what a lot of people do nowadays is they try to say, oh, can't we all just get along? Why do we have to say that we're right and you're wrong? We just say everybody has their own truth. Everybody can be right, and then we can all dance around with flower petals or whatever, okay?
Then steal their iPad.
Exactly. Well, that's the other thing. But here's more my fundamental belief. When somebody comes up to me and they say, I believe everybody's right. Nobody's wrong. Everybody's right. Really? You think you're right about that?
Mm-hmm.
So when I disagree with you and I say I don't think that's correct, what does that make me in your eyes?
Wrong.
Wrong.
Yeah.
And so there is no such thing as a purely inclusive view. You can't. The moment you advance an opinion that's different from my opinion, you're saying you think you're right and I'm wrong.
It's necessarily exclusive.
Exactly. So even these spiritualists and even the modern, spiritual but not religious people that that's describing are exclusive. They're saying that their view is right, whereas our view is wrong. All right. Kay Briggs is obviously does not agree with our current president and is using a colloquial. I'm not going to repeat that on air.
Okay.
So I get it. So, so that's kind of the whole idea. It's going to laugh when I read people that say things like this, like, oh, we're so upset with the exclusivism of all these religious groups. I got news for you. You are also an exclusive religious group because you are saying that your view is right and everybody else's is wrong.
And taking it a step further, if you were to press them on that, I'm sure they would get pretty dogmatic about saying that their view is right.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of hypocritical there, and they don't see the irony in it.
Yeah.
And again, there's hypocrisy in all of us. I think Pastor Jay had given a message a while back saying,
Pastor Jay, biggest hypocrite of all. No. Where are you going with this, man? He's leaving. He thinks the floodgates can just open.
No. He had given a message where he said that, one of the major indictments against the church is that we're all hypocrites. Organized religion is that they're hypocrites. And yeah, newsflash, yeah, there's room for one more. Exactly. Everybody is a hypocrite in some form or another. The only one who wasn't was Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Is Jesus Christ.
So, and that's the thing. This professor is a professor at a Unitarian Universalist church, and that's one of the problems, I think, with that whole worldview. The Unitarian Universalist worldview is that, you know, it tries to create this religion where everybody can be right. You know, it's the whole analogy of different paths up the same mountain. We're all taking different paths up the same mountain. It just doesn't hold true, because they can't. All world religions can't be true. They contradict each other. I mean,
Exclusive truth claims.
Christianity says God is a Trinity. Islam says to say God is a Trinity is the most unforgivable of sins. You know, they can't. Those two can't both be true. And yet, so the only way that Universalists, for example, try to make it seem like they're all true is by watering down all the various different religions so that they are devoid of any meaning. So now what you're describing and trying to compatibilize, if that's even a word, is not Christianity. And like, no, if you're trying to say that Christianity is true and Islam can be true and Hinduism can be true, there's all sorts of varieties of Hinduism. But any person who actually is an adherent to one of those worldviews would look at what you're saying and not even recognize their own worldview, their own religion within what you're saying. That means you're not really representing their religion,
Right.
you know? And so that's one of the biggest issues there. So, all right. Anything else on that one?
Trying to look at my underlines here. Yeah, and I guess
Did we pull out all the pins?
not to put too fine of a point on it, but he.
Hashtag too many pins.
Hashtag too many
hashtag
pins.
too
I
many
think we
pins.
pulled out most of the pins here, but
Yeah, just I guess kind of rehashing a little bit, but not to put too fine of a point. He says, what the average person tends to mean by spiritual is seeking or experiencing a connection with a greater reality, however they understand it. Meanwhile, religious often means belonging to a group with specific doctrines and rituals. But everybody worships something. You know, everybody's got certain rituals, whether you call it that or not.
and they have
Everybody's
certain
got
doctrine. I mean,
doctrines.
what they're describing is their doctrine.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
It's like you keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. You know, do you understand what doctrine is?
Right.
And when you're trying to say, well, we don't have this exclusivism, you know, where this universe, say that's your doctrine.
Exactly.
Congratulations, you have doctrine. Welcome to the club.
Yep.
You know. So, anyway, all right. That is our final story with Mr. Lander. Now, I do have a little surprise for you. We have a person who has guest hosted this show a couple of times, and not Pastor Jay, who already crashed, all right, who wanted to come tonight to say a special goodbye. I think they've only guest hosted twice, I want to say, something like that. You know what? He gets me too much. He gets my sense of humor too much. Yes, it's Mr. Stay Puft is here, who would like to give you a hug and say goodbye.
I will
to
miss
Ben.
you, Stay Puft.
So, look, he seems a little happy that you're leaving. That's a little, don't worry, his expression is frozen.
He has resting happy face.
Either that or he's secretly gunning for your job.
Back in January. Well, Mr. Stay Puft, we'll have to see how your new movie turns out here in a couple of weeks. If it's popular enough, maybe we want to bring him on as a guest host or as the new permanent host, you know? Get in all those moviegoers.
I don't think you'll have to worry about anybody interrupting you.
If he does, that'd be really freaky and really scary. Kay Briggs here does have a comment here on Alec Baldwin situations. Alec needs to pay financially himself, not insurance. Take him to the cleaners. Well, I will say, the extent of his producer duties hasn't been revealed yet, but he is a producer of the show,
Right.
The movie rather.
And that usually means that they have a hand. Well, if they're an executive producer, their money is backing the
It
project.
could be even as a producer title.
But if
it could
he's a
be.
producer, then they usually have a hand in hiring people. So
So he
Yeah.
may have some
I
personal
mean, whoever,
liability.
yeah,
and he's
especially
definitely going to have some
especially
financial.
If you're right about some of these people who were in charge having had complaints against them before,
Yeah.
you know, there might be some.
So we'll have to see where the investigation goes with that, but it is certainly possible that Mr. Baldwin, he's going to have, my understanding, he's got some financial stake in this, and so he's going to have some financial responsibility. Could have some criminal responsibility. We'll find out. We'll see as the investigation goes forward. So, all right. I am horrible at goodbyes, and we kind of already did our goodbying on Monday night when we went out to dinner.
Yeah. That was nice, by the way. Thank you.
Well, I see it. I'm not going to sign off. Like, I'm not just going to say, and we're done. Bye, Ben. You know, I'm not. That'd be horrible of me. That would be horrible of me. I'm not that evil. Brian Brownell is
Hey.
watching. Hey, Brian,
Hey,
so
Brian.
congratulations and good luck to Ben.
Oh, thank you, Brian.
So I'm glad you chimed in there, Brian. So no, I do look forward to hearing about your future endeavors and the way the Spirit is moving you all up there in Pennsylvania.
And likewise here, everything that's going on. I'd like to hear
Well,
about all the awesome stuff that we've got coming up.
He doesn't even know all the awesome stuff we got coming up. We got some exciting new things. You're going to have to tune in.
And say if you put it on YouTube, I'll find out.
You will find out. So now, are you guys on you? You're on you. You have
There's a Facebook
there's a
page.
Facebook page.
Tentatively, possibly will be on YouTube. I
So
think, that's one of the goals.
let me ask you this then. So people going forward from this day onward want to follow and keep in touch with you. Where do they find you? What's the Facebook page called, for example?
You can look up St. Andrew Evangelical Lutheran, and it's on Facebook.
And it's where is it located again?
Muncie, PA, M-U-N-C-Y.
M-U-N-C-Y.
Yeah.
If you're trying to find where Muncie, PA is, too bad.
Good luck. Now I'll post a comment on a future show even and give everybody the info.
And Robert Koger here says, "Bye, Ben. I will miss your sermons."
Oh, thanks, Robert.
Were you paying attention to them, Robert? No, I'm sorry. Robert works in our tech booth with us. I'm allowed to tease him. He would expect nothing less from me. So anyway, keep us posted. And thank you again very much for everything that you've been doing here. We're going to do our goodbyes one last time. You still have the bye. You're supposed to say thank you. You're supposed to say thank you for watching down. Well, you still have our last story, Mary Kay. The lower third.
I didn't know there was another one.
Well, it's just a thank you. There's a thank you. Thanks for watching one. And there. Thanks for watching. We were, but what you should be saying, Ben is spiritual but not religious?
I don't want to say goodbye.
So
I'm holding him hostage with YouTube.
all right. Well, I do want to say one last time, like I always do when I sign off. Hey, thank you, Mary Kay.
Thank you, Mary Kay.
Thank you all for watching. I'm doing it in a different order tonight.
Thank you all.
And thank you, Ben, for all the episodes and all the other ministry work. It's been fun.
Thank you, Ken.
Fist bump.
That's right.
Fist
Awesome.
bump, but stay puffed. There we go. All right. See you all in January. God bless.
God bless.